Welcome back, everyone. This is episode number 24 of the Rest and Reza podcast. And today I've got my first ever international guest on the show, who also happens to be my uncle, actually. His name is Talib Dhanji. He is a CPA by profession, has a bunch of experience on the entrepreneurship side. So we'll talk about the economy, we'll talk about inflation. Today's topic is going to be very broad: real estate, economy, maybe even touch on AI a little bit if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure.
But without further ado, I'll give the floor to Talib. If you can introduce to our audience who you are and your background and what you're up to these days.
Thank you. Essen, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And good morning. I think it's still morning here.
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
I'm still in Houston time.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for having me. Great to be here in Toronto, one of my favorite cities. So just a quick background. I'm based out of Houston. Immigrated to the United States in 1990, got my accounting degree, and then joined a Big Four, and pretty much spent most of my career at Ernst & Young, where I had the opportunity to serve some of EY's largest clients in both the audit and advisory space. My specialty in that area was energy trading. Right. That opportunity gave me a chance to travel the world, gain a lot of experiences about how big companies operate. While based in Houston, I also started to invest in the real estate markets in Houston. In addition, I also invested in some services businesses, for example, some car washes.
Nice.
I recently launched a couple of years ago a business called Tax Cutter, where it's a digital service. It's a startup, and we help our customers, our residential customers, challenge their property taxes. In the United States, you can challenge property taxes. Yeah. And you can get them reduced. So I launched a business. So to say that I'm keenly interested in small businesses, nice. It's very clear from our activities. The areas that I really focus on is where commercial value is. I'm also a tax specialist in the real estate space. Started with friends, and I'm providing that advice to other people. So just very involved in I would say, the Houston/Texas markets. And so glad to be here.
Just curious, why the car wash business? That's pretty unique. So.
It's a unique business. Yeah. So if you look at within the car wash sectors, right, the area that I focus on is coin-operated car washes. This is where you pull up your car, you wash your car yourself, Now, if you think about it, I got into the car washes because it's a real estate play. Nice. Car washes are typically located around neighborhoods, Yeah. And there's good land. And often you can find undervalued land because the car wash may not be doing that well. Now, once the car wash is operating, then effectively it takes care of all the expenses and then some. You can buy these car washes with seller financing. So effectively, you can put down, 15% down, and the rest is paid by car wash. So it's a good overall, play. Yeah. But real estate from that perspective, you can see a 20 to 30% increase in what you paid for because of that. So that's really why. Also, finally, I wanted to be I'm always very interested in consumer businesses. So that was a way to get in. Yeah. Keeping in mind, my focus is on businesses that don't need a lot of labor. Okay. And in these coin-operated car washes, you can operate them at 0.2 FTE.
Self-serve almost, yeah.
Self-serve, exactly. So that's why.
Got it. So less labor, less, overhead, I guess, as well.
Less overhead, self-operated, you can market it through Google. Yeah. So it's a great way to enter a business. It's a safe business, and it's backed up by land. Yeah. So you can always get out of it very easily as well.
Nice. That's good. So, taking it back to the real estate side of things. So obviously living here in Toronto for the last 30 years, me being in the industry for the last decade or so, when I first started, real estate prices were like 300, 400,000. And now they're in the 1 millions, 1.2s. Yeah. So I know the Houston market and the Toronto market are different, but over here what we're seeing is rising interest rates, rising costs, rising home prices. Yeah. It's becoming very, very difficult for first-time home buyers, millennials, to get into the market. Yeah. So what's the landscape like in the US right now? And also specifically in the Houston market, are there any opportunities that you're working on that would make sense for someone like us to maybe invest in, consider there?
Really, really good question. So several things. So let me just, there are some similarities and there's some dissimilarities, right? The similarities are, of course, rising interest rates. We are the same we are seeing in the U.S. right now. Home mortgages are probably around 7.5. Commercial rates, we were recently pricing out. We were trying to buy some land and build a warehouse. The loans, the bank loans are coming out to be 10.5%. On a variable to fixed is 12.5, right? That effectively basically kills that business, right? So interest rates are definitely similarities in terms of the environment we're in. The dissimilarity is that, and we've known this, I've been coming to Toronto for the last 25, 30 years. I mean, there, the median price of a new home in Houston, Texas is $430,000 US.
Yeah.
Right, so if you think about it, and that's a home that's about 2,500 square feet, new build, right? So for the average person from Toronto, that would be a godsend, right? That, wow, you can buy a new home, inside, within the city limits or whatever. And so in Texas, we did not see real estate appreciation until the last 2-3 years.
Okay.
Right? I mean, real estate would go up maybe 4 or 5%. It wasn't like the Northeast or Toronto where you're just getting this massive increase, right? Yeah. But the cost to enter is much less, right? And so the rental returns are very similar. You can get 7-8%, on your investment. So to just jump ahead and address your investment question, with less dollars, you have the ability to get similar returns. So that's an advantage, that the Houston and the Texas markets are offering, right? The other thing is that what we're seeing in the United States is massive growth in the South, right? So what's happening is similar to like Toronto, the Northeast, the New York markets, and the California markets are heavily taxed, and home prices are exorbitant. So there's been mass migration to the South, Texas being one of them. Houston, just to give you an idea, Houston is adding 1 million people a year.
Wow.
And so it's sitting right now at 6 million population. It's forecasted to be, sort of 10 million in the next 4 years, the most populated U.S. city by 2050, right? What does that mean? That means massive growth, right? So there's a shortage of new home constructions. I mean, while interest rates where they are, builders are building new homes because they can't put enough of them out there, right? So you're still seeing very good returns on new home constructions in Houston, as an example. And same thing would apply to Dallas as well, and to a certain extent Austin. But you're seeing this trend of migration that's kind of driving this very significant economic growth.
So what is it about Houston specifically? Is it because it's like a multicultural city? Is there's diversity? Like I mean, I've been there several times as well, so I do see some parallels and similarities between Toronto and Houston. I think in Toronto, we're also seeing like massive population growth, which is why the prices are going up, because the amount of people coming into the country is not keeping pace with the supply of homes. So what is it about Houston that is bringing in so many people, and where you can still get like a good, like the city itself? Like what is it about the city itself, I guess?
So the first thing is the availability of land, right? I mean, from a square footage perspective, if you're buying land inside the city in prime area, you can get land still for $100 a square foot, maybe 50.
I wish that was the case.
That's impossible to imagine in Toronto, right?
Exactly.
But you can, right? And so what that means is that builders, can build. The other thing about Houston and Toronto is Houston is a very large city like Toronto is. But the way Houston spread was that the suburbs developed first. Urbanization didn't happen, right? So basically within the city limits, 4 or 5 miles, there were pockets of neighborhoods, and there were a lot of what I would call poor areas, and then people basically, started building houses in suburbs, right? I mean, the American dream, big house, big yard, 2 cars, all that was true, right? What happened now in the last 5 years is that people are having to drive 90 minutes to come into work, and so they were like, this is not good. So the urbanization of Houston is going on. So wherever there's land available inside the city limits, within 5 miles, 7 miles, there are builders who specialize in it. They're building, townhouses and so on and so forth. So urbanization of Houston is going on, which presents a very significant opportunity. That's number one. Number two, Houston has now become the largest medical center in the United States. Massive expansion of medical facilities, right? They're building 1 million additional square feet of medical space, hospitals, research centers in Houston.
Yeah.
And so Houston, from that perspective, that is driving a lot of demand for example, nurses and physicians and support staff, right, all around the medical center,
Okay.
which happens to be at the tip of the city limits, right? So that's the second thing. And third thing, which I think everybody knows, is Houston has always been the oil and gas capital
Yeah.
of the United States and of the world, right? What's interesting is that now it's the renewables capital. So companies who are driving wind farms, solar farms, batteries, right? They're coming to Houston. Why? Because Texas is a easy state to do business with.
Yeah.
Lots of tax credits, easy to set up, right? No state income tax. So
Right.
as a result, a lot of companies come. As you've seen Tesla, move their headquarters. You've seen others, right? And so there's a growing trend of that in Texas. For example, Dallas has more Fortune 100 companies than New York does.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why that combined aspect of energy, renewables, easy business environment, lots of land, less regulation, right? You don't need so many permits over there.
Yeah.
That all drives this natural growth that we are seeing.
Yeah.
And then internal migration from Northeast and the West, right? Last comment. You own $1 million house or $1.5 million house in San Francisco. You can get 3 times a better house for half the price.
Yeah.
Would you move? You buy it for cash, you're okay. And if you're working remotely, and that's what's driving a lot of the growth in that area, right?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what's happening here as well, because now a lot of people that I've come across are, well, not a lot of people, but you're starting to see a movement where people are offloading their properties, which they gain equity for like $1 million, $2 million, and they're okay to move further and further away, in the retirement phase. And some of my clients even actually sold their homes here for $1 million plus, and they moved to Houston and Dallas.
Yeah.
And they bought a house for maybe 1/3 of the cost.
Yeah.
Right? Paid off in cash.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that a lot. I think that's going to continue as our cities become more and more expensive. But I guess going back again to why things are becoming so expensive, one reason because of inflation. So a big portion of our audience is, the younger generation in their 20s, 30s, millennials.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't really still understand the concept of inflation, why rates are going up, why are the cost of goods going up. So can you kind of break it down from your experience and your knowledge, what causes inflation and why is it impacting our society, both in the US and Canada?
Sure, absolutely. And so we'll just do a quick high-level 101 on inflation and its impact, right? I mean, from a layman's perspective, the way I would think about inflation is how expensive things are. Okay. Now we all know that in the last couple of years, lunch meals, dinner meals, coffee cups, coffee, everything is costing more, right? Uber is costing more, and so on and so forth. And we were talking earlier, as in you were commenting that it's not just things are costing more, the packaging is getting smaller.
Yeah.
So you're getting less for more, right? So we are all feeling the pinch, whether it's a loaf of bread, whether it's a gallon of milk, or something, and these are the basic things, right? Cars are getting more expensive and so on and so forth. A lot of that is so what does that mean? It's, when people say it's inflation. What is inflation, right? At the end of the day, our economies operate on debt. Companies are set up, they put some of, you put in your own equity investment, but the bulk of your funding comes from banks, right? And then you're paying banks, a cost of capital and interest rate, right? So on and so forth. Now when banks increase interest rates, and we'll come back to why they do that, right? When banks increase interest rates, everything being the same, if you're having to pay more money to the bank, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're not going to reduce your profit margin. You're going to increase your pricing, right? That when you increase your pricing, now you are a producer of milk. Milk is a input into restaurants, into other byproducts, into cheese. Well, they increase pricing, right? Yeah. So you can see this domino effect where an interest rate increases pricing across the board, and things get more expensive for us, right? So that's kind of the idea of sort of how it works. Now, why do banks increase interest rates? Well, fiscal policy is determined by the countries, right? So in the US, the feds determine what the interest rates. And what the feds want is they don't like high inflation, right? They don't like things being more expensive because then economies can go into recession. Because when things are more expensive, people stop spending, they start saving more, businesses rely on people buying, and so then you can see everything comes crashing down, right? And we saw, some of that or a lot of that during COVID, when nobody was going out, and so companies were suffering so much so that people needed massive bailouts and stimulus packages, so on and so forth. The U.S. government gave the airline industry almost $25 to $50 billion of specific aid so the airlines wouldn't go out of business, right? So you can see an example of economic activity, right? Now, so going back to the inflation part, when there are recessions, then governments decrease interest rates so that things get cheaper, so people spend more money, right? But when things are getting expensive, their default answer is to increase interest rates so that things, so that costs go up, right? And as a result of costs going up, right, there's a slowdown in spending, which then brings down, the inflation, right? So it's a painful process for the consumer, but it's what the Feds are trying to do to basically offset, balance out what could be, massive recession or depression, blah, 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 versus economic growth, right? So we're in this stage now, and we're in this stage mainly because post-COVID, a lot of money was pumped into the economies, right? People got stimulus checks and all that. Well, when you have more money, what do? Right? You spend more, right? And you are willing to pay more for the same thing. People are willing to pay more for coffee, so the coffee prices went up, right? And that's what drove inflation. How now the government is trying to rein that back in. It's a painful process, right? But it's the parity that's needed to get back to growth-oriented economy.
Yeah. Do you think during COVID that maybe the Feds or even the Bank of Canada, did they reduce rates too fast? And is this why we're seeing this painful process right now? Because just to kind of give you a perspective of what we're hearing in Toronto and Canada in general, is that when COVID happened, like obviously everybody was shocked and they were scared that businesses were going to fail. So our Bank of Canada drastically reduced the rates to the point where the housing market was in a frenzy that we've never seen before. And at the time, I remember asking myself, like, I don't know if we need to reduce it so low because the market was already pretty hot. And the statement coming out of the Bank of Canada was that rates are going to stay low for a long time. So go out and spend. Word for word is what they said. Paraphrasing, but this is what they were saying. Right? Lo and behold, last year we had double-digit interest rate hikes almost every quarter, every month. And now people are like, well, you basically lied to us, right? So is that kind of what happened in the States too, or?
But it's similar, and look, you could probably find as many people saying they were wrong and others saying they were right? Economists, what I've learned is, I'm an avid reader of the Wall Street Journal. You have two opinions on everything, right? Nobody agrees on anything, right? But if you look at historically what happened, I mean, fiscal policy is an art, it's not a science, right? And so if they get it right, they get it right through pure chance. Otherwise, they're bound to make mistakes, right? And so what they can do is they can basically, they can tug at the problem, but it's not like surgery where you can go in and remove a malignant piece of whatever and fix it. It's not like that. It's an art. So it is trial and error, right? So I think from their perspective, what they were trying to get you to do is spend more, which you did, but you spend a lot more, and now they're trying to pull you back, right? And that's why rates are going up. Because ultimately, look, what happens when rates go up? I'm sure from your reader's perspective, of a listener's perspective, you can now make some really good money, but just keeping your money in the bank. But that's what they want you to do. They don't want you to spend it. They want you to keep it in the bank, right? So that you can make more money and spending goes down, so inflation comes down, right? So we're in this cycle of right now. But for folks, this is the time probably, this is a time to conserve cash, of course, right? But this could be also a time if you are sitting on cash for some great opportunities. I follow the Toronto markets, right? Prices are down. And this market is unusual to have prices down, right?
It doesn't happen too often.
So I think it depends on the investors, right? But my view is real estate investing is a long-term game, right? And diversity is good, And so if you're looking at the Houston market from that perspective, it's good diversity. Because there are some great opportunities out there, to invest, right? a lot of people are not investing, let's be clear, because they're uncertain about what's going to happen, and some of the areas. But at least in the residential space in Houston and in Texas, there are plenty of opportunities to invest.
Right. So that's a good point you brought up, because actually one of my questions was, is it still a good time to buy? So if you are, let's say, younger millennial again, just we're addressing the millennials a lot because they're going through a lot of pain when it comes to buying a house here in Toronto. Do you think at a certain point, does it even make sense to get into the housing market if it's so expensive? Or would you rather tell a millennial or younger guy to keep renting and maybe invest somewhere else? Like, where is that line, and are you still an advocate of home ownership despite prices going up?
Well, you're talking about rates going up, right?
Rates and also, rates and also prices are not cheap, right? So
look, for me, it just seems like, interest rates are temporary, right? So if I do an analysis, I look at it, okay, so these rates are too high, eventually they'll come down, right? You look at charts, rates go up, the rates come down, right? So the analysis should be long-term, right? That, okay, so the next couple of years, you're not going to make anything, but after that you could make something, or next 5 years, be conservative. And if still the returns are there, then I would say yes, because guess what? When you're keeping your money in the bank, you're getting 5%, whatever you're getting, but your money is not worth as much because inflation is high, right? So buying a capital asset is always a good thing, because if that capital asset keeps going up over time, that's usually a better use of your capital than sitting in the bank, right? Now, I'm an advocate, you shouldn't borrow money to invest, but if you're sitting on cash and you get some good opportunities, then that's really, that should be it, right? And so from that perspective, I'm an advocate of deploying capital in all markets, right? Because you may be seeing opportunities pricing-wise in Toronto, or for that matter in Houston, that you may not see otherwise. So I think, for me, real estate investing, you have to remind yourself, it's a long-term game. To create a good real estate portfolio, it takes 20 years, You start now small, you can start investing. And in Houston, when I say we are investing in, residential, we're not building it ourselves. We're investing with real estate development companies who will give you a project for $50,000, $100,000 investment, and you can get very good returns, right? So that's what I'm talking about, is basically investing in with companies that are offering you opportunities, to get in, in terms of like when we're talking about investing other than your homes, right? So those opportunities are good opportunities right now.
Are there opportunities in Houston or Texas in general that you work with that deal with more like multifamily housing? Is that something big over there?
Yes, multifamily housing has been very big in Houston for the last 5-6 years. Today, the analysis is showing that there's probably a slight overbuild in the multifamily. So what's happening? Let's look at the economy, right? Inflation is high, rents are going up, right? Now, when there's a little bit of oversupply, then the renters have a choice now, right? And they can also go and rent houses over there. So I think in the multifamily area, what's happening right now is that in the last 5 years, the typical multifamily that was selling for $70 a door, $70,000 a door, went up to like $120, $130. Massive returns, right? That's starting to pull back now because of oversupply, a little bit of oversupply, and there's a lot of projects in the pipeline that are coming out, again, to meet the city's needs. So I think in the multifamily space, and interest rates have gone up, commercial rates have gone up, and so multifamily investments were returning somewhere between 15 to 20% on an annualized basis. I see that dropping down to still a decent 12% return. Now, the problem is, it's not bad, but people who are used to 15, they don't want to get 12. But multifamily is probably still an attractive sector in the Texas markets.
Okay. I guess shifting gears more on the entrepreneurship side, business side of things, because you do a lot of investment in business as well, like you said, and you've taught me a lot about businesses. For people out there right now that are looking to invest in a business, what advice would you give them? What should they be looking for, whether they're starting up a business or even buying an existing business?
It's a great question. I'm an advocate that in a typical family, whether let's say you're single, everybody should be spending a little bit of time, and by that I don't mean just sitting with friends and saying, hey, we should do something, right?
Yeah.
Actually doing something about it, right? And that could be market research, that could be looking at what's going on, reading about it, subscribing to something. You have to kind of, in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to plant the entrepreneurial seed within yourself, right? And then you have to let it grow. And because it just doesn't happen overnight, right? Because at the end of the day, investing in a business eventually ends up you writing a check. And often people, when they have to write that check for that initial investment, they're like, no, I'm not ready for it, because you haven't trained yourself for that, the risks and so on and so forth, right? So it's always good to start to say, okay, you know what? Okay, I'm going to do something 5 years from now, but what do I need to have in place right now? That's going to drive your networking. That's going to drive your market research. That's going to drive a relationship, with a banker. So, overall your skill set will get, but plant the entrepreneurial seed first, right? Read about it, subscribe to it, whatever, just so that you do it. Then you start to see, okay, what need can I fulfill, right? For example, when I started the tax cutter business, the property taxes in Houston, or dealing with counties is a very complex process, right? The terminology is very difficult. People don't understand it. There's a lot of confusion. And so I thought maybe I could solve my problem, or the problem like where homeowners like myself have. They don't understand the terminology. They don't understand how they can get their property taxes, that I could provide them a solution to do that, right? So you think about, hey, something that you're passionate about, that you can do that, right? But it's an iterative process. There's lots of failures that come. Those are learning experiences, but they are failures. And so my advice would be that start early, start to gain, give yourself the tools, the data, the research, talk to friends who've opened businesses, right? So that you can get mentally prepared, start saving for it. And then, there's plenty of franchises out there that you can invest in, right? At the end of the day, if you look at entrepreneurs, what do they have? They have freedom of time, right? They put in a lot of sacrifices, but guess what? They get to decide where they're going to be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? They may be working, but they get to decide that. That's a choice they make, right? And we all would love that. But I'm a big advocate that you should be doing that in some aspect, And now let's just quick comment. Amazon. Online selling and all that. There's so many opportunities, right? Where you can do something like that, But the key is you have to put time into it. Nothing happens without time.
Right. And I guess you also, like you said, you have flexibility. Well, not flexibility, but you can schedule what you want around the things that are important to you. But your work doesn't feel like work. It's actually enjoyable. So,
it's yours, right? My garden, my blood, sweat, and tears, right? That's the same thing with business, right? And so that passion, people say, I love my job. I spent 25 years in corporate America. So, I enjoyed my job, and I loved the experiences I had. But the passion that I can bring to my own business doesn't even compare, to what I was bringing, And I felt like I was a very engaged, employee and a partner for my firm. But still, your business is your business, right? And you feel it, it's personal, right? And so, and it also helps you build skills that you otherwise don't have, Talk to entrepreneurs, they go through challenges, but, they know how to weather the storm, and they don't live with this anxiety, oh my God, the economy is down, they have other anxieties, but am I going to lose my job? This is the downside of corporate America. You could be a great worker, great person, but you get downside, and you're like, what happened here, right? So that there's an element of that, and you're starting to see, that in new generation that they don't give a lot of brand loyalty to companies anymore, right? They want to do contract work, they want to do other things. So you're starting to see that change come through.
And I think with businesses, it's also, you can have multiple businesses, whereas a job, you have one job. But with businesses, you can have different streams of revenue, which I think is really important in today's day and age with cost of living going up. Would you say that someone needs to have at least 2 or 3 revenue streams in this society?
It's a great question. I think it depends on the person, right? I mean, what people will tell you is that focusing on one thing, is the best way to approach it, right? My view is it depends on your personality, right? And the indicator is, are you too stretched? There is a limit to what you can get done in a day, right? And when you have multiple businesses, then you need better teams, Now, if you're a micromanager, and there's nothing wrong with being one, because, micromanagers get a lot done, then one business is sufficient, right? Because you want to look at every aspect of it, right? And you want to bring your blood, sweat, and tears in. My view, my own personal preference is I like multiple businesses, but I've also made mistakes in a sense that I've stretched myself too thin sometimes. So I've recognized that, and I've pulled back, and so there is a right medium, but again, you know yourself better than anybody else, right? If you're able to delegate, you're able to do this, you're able to supervise, then multiple businesses work. If you're not able to do that, and you're very particular about how the PowerPoint looks and what the product feels like and looks like, then you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that, because that's the best and highest use of your time,
Right. So. Gotcha. Last question for you on the business side of things, artificial intelligence, which is obviously up and coming now. So I don't know how much you know about it, but I'm using it, and it's a phenomenal tool. What are you seeing in North America, and how is AI changing the course of doing business and day-to-day operations?
I mean, look, this is nothing new. Everybody recognizes AI to be a massive change, right? But what does it mean? Right? So when I was at Ernst & Young, we were talking about digital transformation many, many years ago, right? I always try to look at things from a layman's perspective, right? So digital transformation meant automation, right? Things that you were doing manually, you could now do it. A computer program could do it for you, right? So that was automation, right? Now with AI, the way I look at it is, it's automation plus, right? That not only can it do the things you want it to do, it can also make some decisions for you, It can give you better insights, right? So that is massively changing, right? Of course, a lot of us didn't know anything about it until we saw ChatGPT. Now ChatGPT gave the average person idea what the potential is, right? It can write a better resume than you can. It can give you more insights, right? It can plan for you. So in the course of human evolution, this is a massive step forward, right? And so it is going to affect all of our lives, in many ways. For some of us, it's awesome. For others, we'll be out of jobs, right? There are certain things that, human beings will just not have to do. So I think how fast it comes through, time will tell. But yes, is it a tool that each one of us can use? Absolutely, and should get comfortable using it, right? You should be very comfortable using new technologies. And that's where the younger generation obviously has a huge start. They're much more comfortable. The older generation gets very nervous, And so but you should be comfortable adopting these technologies, particularly like marketing, targeting customers, and so on and so forth, right? So I'm seeing huge investments coming through. And then of course, how it impacts us.
Nice, okay. So just to end off the podcast, some fun questions now, non-business related. So I'm gonna ask you some rapid fire questions, and just to get to know you a bit more. What's your favorite movie that you've watched and that you continue to watch over and over?
Matrix.
Matrix, okay. Really, how come?
It's just, every time I watch Matrix, it's, so I have a philosophical side to my personality. The fact that, the character is living in a world that's completely made up of, and that we're plugged in and managed by machines was dawned on me that, is this our reality, right? And so we go about our businesses, adopting everything, and so on and so forth. So I just felt like that was that movie was ahead of its time,
Yeah, it definitely was.
So it's same thing with Forrest Gump, It's like, it's just so that from that aspect, I felt like that's a movie I can watch over and over
again. You've traveled a lot. Where's your favorite place to travel?
I've traveled because of my associate with Ernst & Young. I've literally traveled the world, right? Obviously, favorite is always for me. Pakistan, where I was born, is a great place to go back to. Obviously, for sentimental reasons, emotional reasons, family reasons. But also, Pakistan is a beautiful country.
Yeah.
For those of us who haven't seen northern Pakistan, it's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. So, other than that, Singapore, just in terms of how organized it is, has been is a great favorite. But I feel like love Toronto as well. The flowers here are phenomenal. Yeah. So every place has its own, good
charm.
things that you can look at.
Where have you the list of cities you can mention? Where have you traveled? You traveled a lot, so.
Yeah, I've basically visited every major city in the United States, probably every major capital in Europe, throughout Southeast Asia, right? The only continent I really been to Australia. The only continent I haven't traveled to is Africa. I've been to Egypt, but none of the other countries, Okay. That never, but it was, so literally almost all parts of the world.
And where was the best food, you'd say?
I would say, the best food, again, outside of Pakistan, Singapore, because of its multicultural aspects of it. Yeah. London is a phenomenal place for, foods, again, because of the diversity you see over there, right? And then South America, with its cuisine, right? So, nice. Had some amazing sushi in Rio de Janeiro, which is interesting. It has the largest Japanese population outside of Japan.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so,
That's cool.
So, but yeah, it's been fun.
Nice. What's your favorite book that you've read that you would recommend to us as well?
I used to read a lot of books before. Yeah. Now, I don't read as many fictional books or others because I feel like I read a lot and I could just practice, Yeah. But I thought that my favorite books are ones that help you improve, Yeah. And so there was a book called, I recently read a book called The Seed of Trust. Okay. And it was written by Stephen Covey Jr., whose father wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective, Yeah. And so the Seed of Trust was eye-opening for me because it dawned on me how much trust, how strong a part trust plays in your relationships, whether they're personal or professional, right? Yeah. But if you focus on building trust, then the relationships flourish themselves, And I've actually, implemented it, and I've seen the returns of it, right? Yeah. So I think if you're a professional, you should definitely understand how you can build trust, with people you deal with, and what are the things you may be doing consciously or unconsciously that are eroding that trust, and then you're not getting the deals you want, you're not getting the responses you want, and it may be because something you're doing that is effectively not investing in that trust that people want to see from you.
What's it called? The Seed of Trust.
The Seed of Trust.
The Seed of Trust. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. Last question. What's the best piece of advice somebody ever gave you?
Long time ago, I had a counselor. So when I had joined in public accounting, we would be assigned mentors, right? And I was new to the United States. I was new to this culture, right? I had a very strong, Islamic faith background, so I knew all that. So, but the West was different. And somebody once told me that, look, you're going to succeed in America if you look at, if you focus on, or you tell yourself that everything is your responsibility, right? Be responsible, and then you will succeed, right? So don't leave it to others to take care of your stuff, right? Yeah. And when you're responsible for something, be responsible. And just showing that ownership, I think really helps. That's what leaders do. They take ownership of, large activities. People trust them. So I think that being responsible more than the average is really, really is something that can help you both personally and professionally.
Nice, awesome. That's a great way to end off the podcast.
Thank
you so much. It was a pleasure having you.
Same here.
I think when you're back, there's so much more we can talk about. So we'll do a part 2 whenever you're back in town.
Absolutely, happy to do it.
Thanks so much. If you guys enjoyed the content, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.